the interview number 1 on the 22nd of March,
1984.
Thompson.
There are 3 Dr. Thompsons, so you better say Charles.
Charles. Any relation, the other 2?
No.
Or
Brothers.
both brothers? Older or younger?
2.5 years old.
Twins? Or? Uh-huh. How many in your family?
6. 3 girls and 3 boys. The 3 girls were born up the street at 1129 Walnut, and the 3 boys were born here at 1141 Walnut.
So you pretty much lived here all your life?
I was born upstairs.
Huh. And did you do your schooling here in Massachusetts?
Hyde School,
Yeah.
which they're fighting to protect and not have it taken away.
Do you think that's a good movement? Are you in favor of that? Or?
Somebody knows better than I what the expected need for a grammar school is. And they've done a good job changing some of the other schools that obviously didn't need. The problem in Newton Highlands is that you have a very strong oriented association that wants to keep the school, and so they put a lot of heat on it. It's a very active improvement association.
Mm-hmm.
So if you read the front page of the graphical, you know, they picketed City Hall to try to keep it. And in those days we didn't go to junior high school, so we went there from kindergarten to the 8th grade, and then on to Newton High School for 4 years.
So it's a bit of a historical landmark in a sense, I guess.
Well, there are a lot of schools as old or older.
Yeah.
Big problem is that the shell of the old Hyde is the old Hyde School is not very well from a physical standpoint. And something's will have to come down, I think.
Yeah, probably put up a new building. That would be tough, I guess.
You need a parking lot.
Interesting. I'd like to go in at some point. Maybe we can touch on it later. The relationship of your family, because I'm sure that will come into play a lot into the history of you and your brothers and sisters. And maybe we'll get going on some other things first, and then come back to that. So you were born in 1918, is that correct?
17.
17, okay. And you're 76 now?
Yes, he's 77 next year.
60.
66, next birthday, April 15th.
April 15. And how many older and how many younger in your family?
3 girls older.
And
They
two
were
boys?
born up the street, 5 houses.
Yeah.
In 1916, my father bought this house, and the 3 boys were delivered here. They were born in 1919, I was born 17.
Your father was a doctor?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
He came to Number Falls in 1897, where he started practice.
Was he born in this country or?
He's Canadian.
Where did your family originate, do you know? Or before Canada?
Yeah, Yorkshire. That is the Thompson side.
Yeah.
Thompsons left, or 2 brothers left Yorkshire in 1772 and went to New Brunswick. Were farmers. My father and his 2 brothers were born on a farm. And one of them became a dentist here in Newton Highlands. The other became a physician. Third stayed in Canada as a railroad engineer. So we have Canadian relatives. And I have a brother a dentist, a brother a surgeon, and myself. Father was a doctor.
And you're what, general practitioner?
Yes.
Do any of your sisters work, or are they?
I have a sister who works for my brother as a dental hygienist. One sister, deceased, was a social service worker, and the other sister was married and had kids. Well, everybody had kids, but
as a housewife. Where did you, after you finished high school here, where did you go into college?
Went to Mount Herman for 1 year. I went to
Northfield Mount Herman, which was probably then just Mount Herman.
It was associated with, as part of the Northfield School. Northfield did not appear in the name of the school. There was a cooperative venture in which everybody worked. My total cost for that year was $400.
For school?
It was tuition, board, room, laundry.
I know, because I went to Wilbraham Academy, and what was $5,000 for me.
Yes. And our group milked the cows, another group dug potatoes, and every Wednesday we killed 4 pigs and dressed them. And some of us worked in the kitchen, some of us waited on the table.
So everyone in the school though worked? That was part of the...
That's right. And if you went there, it was a 4-year school, and if you went there at the beginning, why, you got the best jobs, which was tutoring, proctor, things like that. And if you went like I did, you might end up digging potatoes at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Not too fun to wake up to, I guess. That's what it takes.
At 18, that didn't like
Was that your first job pretty much, or had you been working as a kid?
I worked, I guess the first job I had was, that paid was the Boy Scout commissary officer in a summer camp. And I worked summer camps for the next 7 or 8 years until I was in medical school.
That was around here, or?
Cape Cod.
Yeah. Your family have a home down there, or no?
No summer. Nobody went anywhere until they went out to work. So we worked there in the summertime as a sailing instructor. One year I was a doctor in a Boy Scout camp. And then it was, in those days you went to school in the summertime. An accelerated course before the war. So by the 40s, you would spend most of your time practicing, studying medicine.
So where did you end up going to college after Northfield?
Dartmouth. 4 years at Dartmouth. And mostly zoological courses, chemistry, physics.
Were you pretty certain by then that you were going to go into medicine?
I knew I was going to be a doctor at age 5 because my father told me.
Good reasoning.
And the boy, my brother is a dentist, was told he was going to be a dentist so he could go to work for his uncle. And then the other boy, his twin brother, became a surgeon. Because we were all told as kids that, this was the thing to do. And apparently we were able to get into the postgraduate training program, which would be pretty difficult now.
Yeah, I'm just fighting my way into law school now, so I know that. I've been lucky enough, I've been accepted at one down in New York. I don't know that I'm ready for something like that. I don't know if it's the best thing for me right now. It's tough to say, but it's hard. It's very competitive. Yeah, I'm graduating this semester.
So then I was accepted at 3 medical schools and went to Tufts. Lived at home for a couple of years. The 3rd and 4th year I lived at Newton Wellesley Hospital, working nights. As a, first year, the 3rd year in medical school I was a lab technician. Did all the laboratory work at night. Went to school in the daytime. The 4th year I went back and was what they call an expan, in which you hung around and did everything. Ran the pull motors, because those are the days of polio. And helped out in deliveries. And, it was like similar to what 3rd or 4th year medical student is now.
So is that good practical experience? Was that for you, you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I interned there, after going, I went to Hartford Hospital for 3 months as an anesthetist in a anesthetist program. Went back to Newton Wellesley Hospital until my induction into the Navy in 1944. And I was in the amphibious force, invaded southern France, came back and spent a year at the Chelsea Naval Hospital as an ear, nose, and throat specialist by mistake. Learned how to do all sorts of things. I was discharged from the Navy in 46.
You worked for the Navy when you came back as an air nose and throat?
Chelsea Naval Hospital.
Oh, so okay. So that was the Navy. That's surprising that you were actually in combat, wasn't it? Don't you think, as being a doctor, or pretty much, is that common?
Sure.
Because I mean, I would say now
They
that.
used to go.
Well, absolutely.
I didn't actually go on the beach because the beach, I would have probably, but the beach said it was never, we never got in, so to speak, it sort of stayed offshore. Basically, you were a family physician to about 550 men and 80 officers in a flotilla of landing crafts. And I had a dispensary that I, made, and carted it around. And you ministered to the various mundane problems of the area. North Africa, Sicily, short time in Naples, and the coast of southern France for a while. Washing wax out of people's ears, and taking care of their venereal diseases.
Is there any serious? Not really, no.
No, because any serious injury would never come to my. It would bypass and go out to the hospital ship.
Oh.
It wasn't like MASH.
Mm.
On shore they had, once the invasion was successful. But by that time the resistance was not very much. And I came back here in 1947, started an office here. My father had been dead for 6 years, so the place was vacant.
This was your father's practice right here?
And he died in 1940, 1947. I started, and then was the anesthetist at the Newton Wellesley Hospital and did general practice for 3 years, and then gave up anesthesia and did full-time general practice, which I'm still doing. It's very cut and dry.
Well, in a sense, maybe not, though I'm sure there's a lot of color in between there, I'd well imagine. Did you have a particular interest in anesthesia, or was that just something you had picked up and figured you would stay with for a while?
Didn't know. I had to make a decision sometime in 48 as to whether I'd give up general practice and become an anesthetist, or give up anesthesia and become general practice.
You kind of had to follow one trade or the other.
Yeah, you could do.
Yeah.
Of course, anesthetists gradually became highly trained, and this would have required me to. I had only had 3 months of formal so-called training in Hartford. You'd have to go on and get your boards in anesthesia. That wasn't my intent, so I did general practice.
What kind of practice would you say it is? More of a family practice? A family? You treat family ailments, or?
Originally, I was an obstetrician, delivered the babies at the Wellesley Hospital. I had a couple of home deliveries back in the old days, so to speak. Did the prenatal, postnatal care, took care of the children, had the privileges to, and still do, as a pediatrician for newborn. I still have pediatric privileges to take children to the Newton Wellesley Hospital, but it's very rare now because kids, unless they have some strange disease, don't go in. I took care of a family-oriented practice and took care of a grandmother and helped her pass away. Took care of malignancies, all sorts of It didn't make any difference.
Mm.
And those families now, I'm taking care of their grandchildren, so to speak. But obviously, the specialization, most of it's now is geriatrics. The age population in the hospital is up to average rate of 80 or 90 years of age.
Something very different than,
Not much different. House calls.
no, I mean, but is the age group, you think, very different than
Oh,
it was
yeah.
30 years ago?
Because my gang that I started with was all growing up,
Yeah.
the younger kids. The primary care, for instance, for the housewife is now the obstetrician or the gynecologist.
Mm.
And the pediatrician has virtually monopoly over the kids until it used to be the age 6 or 8, and then it was increased so that a pediatricians encourage the kids to come until they're 12, 14, or until they become embarrassed to sit in the waiting room. Now you come here. But the age of needing a physician released is after kids 14 or 15, they don't go to doctors because they don't need to, except as required by entrance examinations in the school.
Yeah.
And they stay well until they start having other things that go out of your 50.
So, what I think I'd like to do is go into some other areas and then kind of hopefully tie these together with the type of medicine that you've been practicing. Get some of the background history of the Highlands, such as, start off, I'd like to know a little bit maybe of the ethnic history. Yours seems, I don't know how common it would be for people to come from Canada down to here. Maybe it's fairly common in this area. Is it? Is that so?
There was a large contingency of girls came down, and were either housekeepers or practical nurses. The Canadian girls came down, and they had a large percentage of Canadians in the Wellesley Hospital trained. There were a lot of Canadians here. This town, this part here was a bedroom for Boston, and very little industry to start with. And this house here was built by a Boston banker for his mistress in 1889. And the wool merchants lived out here. And the financial district people. And they rode the train, which is now the MBTA, but that was a steam train originally.
At that time, really? When did it switch over? Do you know to
I
electric?
couldn't tell you the exact date.
When about was that? Any idea?
20 years ago.
So somewhere in the 40s during
Yeah.
late 40s. After the war.
The steam trains changed to diesel, and then the diesel went to the trolling.
That's interesting, yeah. That's one of the things that I was interested in, what the developments in transportation. Do you think that that had any significant bearing on, it seems like it did, on what kind of people lived here in the Highlands?
So, this was the commuting group that took 30 minutes to go to the South Station, as you know where the South Station
Yes,
is.
yeah, sure.
And it was a nice ride in the morning, you came home at night.
And you're right in the banking district there.
Well, it was, you had to walk. In those days, Summer Street was not the financial district like it is now. It was all shopping.
So what was the financial district further up?
Milk Street,
Yeah,
Summer Street.
sure.
It's not too far.
No, but a little bit further, yeah. That's interesting. So what other large ethnic groups would you say have, or at the time, say when you were coming down, when your family was coming down here, what other ethnic groups were settling, and since then, what other groups have settled in here?
Well, as a kid, it was unusual to have a Jewish boy in your class. There were a lot of Catholics. There was an Irish settlement down in Four Corners, which is the Commonwealth Beacon around the cemetery. That was all Irish immigrants with 3 or 4 decker tenement houses. They were the labor force for the local area. They would guys that cut my father's lawn and took out the ash barrels, worked for the city and still do. In Newton Highlands, we had a large Protestant congregation. There's no Catholic church in Newton Highlands, there never was. There's an Episcopal, a Congregational, there was a Methodist, which is now a condominium. When you go down to the center and you have the large Catholic population that attends a church. You go to New Upper Falls, there's a huge Catholic church because in New Upper Falls there was a large influx of labor, Lithuanians, Polacks, Italians, Russians, that worked in the textile mill that was up in New Upper Falls, the petty machine shop, silk mill.
Why do you think they didn't settle around this area? Because of the
There was
labor?
no factory. You're talking about the difference between Newton Highlands and New Upper Falls?
Well, yeah, and also between Four Corners in here, because the Irish settled there. I guess there was more work there, or why would the Irish?
Up there, the low-income housing. These were all one-family houses, all these. But those that are two-family now probably, I'm sure, were one-family when I was growing up. But down there was a tenement district, where the city hall is.
Yeah.
It was called Cox City. Commonwealth, Beacon and Walnut was known as Cary Cross. And I can tell you the names of, those houses you'll see down there are close to the street, small ones. There's one there that's right on the sidewalk, just down here.
Oh yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
Those houses were all jammed in there. And the people who lived there was Regan and Noonan and Sullivan and McGree and McGuire and King and there was a Chandonnay. Where the hell that came from? Kelly, Foley, all that was in what we call Cary Cross. Which is, but this part of New Highlands, like the Western Hills, had a
So
more wealthier group of Protestants.
So that specifically affected the type of people that might live in this area, such as professionals or people working in Boston. Commuters people would have to have a fairly substantial income to live in and around this area, it seems.
This house was worth, in 1916 was $10,000. You'd have to do, I've never sat down and figured it out as to,
what that would be worth in that day.
This house, after the banker died in 1900, the president of the Sokolov Shops, which is now the St. Regis Paper Company. Now that was a huge textile machinery complex in which they made machinery for the textile industry. It was a big heavy foundry. Now the president of that complex, the Sokolov Shops, lived here from 1900 to 1916, and then he moved to a more affluent area on West Newton, and my father bought this house.
Was that right around when your family came down? When did your father come down here?
Came to New Upper Falls in 1897.
So did he set up practice there when
Yeah.
and then he moved down here?
For a long time, he had two offices. He had an office here and an office in Upper Falls. He did a lot of industrial medicine. He worked for the Gainwell Company that makes firearms. He worked for Stowe Wooded that makes rubber rolls and bowling balls. He worked for the Sokolov Shops.
Did it seem like he was doing a lot more injury type stuff, work-related injury? Was there a higher?
The foundry was a terrible place to work. So some of that, but of course he was the family doctor, so he would probably send him over to the hospital or something for definitive repair. And then he would follow them around afterwards.
And check up on them. What other industries were in the area that were noted to be particularly dangerous?
I really don't know the answer to that, except I always knew that the foundry was a bad place. There used to be a Maston Wells fireworks manufacturing company, but I don't remember that that was considered dangerous. Although somebody reminded me the other day that it did burn, and that's why it isn't here anymore. Its location is where the television tower, WBZ tower, there's 4 towers, I believe. It's the one that doesn't have the guy wires. So if you look at it and see the guy wires coming down, that's not the one. Anyway, it was over in that area. I think there's a McDonald's there now.
So after you finish with medical school, you get through the war and whatnot, you settled here in this.
I came back here.
When did you get married?
46.
So that was actually when you just got back, pretty much. And you and your wife. Do you have how many kids have you had? 5 kids or so. What did you do in the late 40s for entertainment? What type of things did you do?
Work. You mean for the children?
Yeah, for the children. Or did you ever go into the city and see a play or anything locally?
No, you'd have to ask my wife about it. We don't remember.
Church-related activities? Yeah.
We were active in Congress and church. And then as the kids grew up, they had their own life in the school system. The family went to Maine in the summertime. We rented for a while, and when we bought a house, and then my wife would go in school clothes, and take the kids, and I'd go stay for a little while in the summertime.
Where was that up in Maine?
With Bay Harbor. They're all out.
Let's get into another subject here that is of interest. The local government. What was it? Always a city council? Did you always have a
Mayor.
as a mayor?
Board of Health. As far as, as long as I can.
Yeah. Were you ever involved at all?
After I started practice. I was on the Board of Health for a long time, and eventually became chairman of the Board of Health for a short period.
And you're no longer involved? When did your involvement end there?
20 years ago. I guess I
Yeah,
really don't
it's
know.
not that these exact dates aren't really all that important. What kind of issues were you dealing with on the Board of Health?
We're involved in the immunization programs. We had charge of all the animal control. If you wanted to have a horse and keep a horse in your stable, you have to appeal to the Board of Health for a license. If you wanted to keep turkeys or ducks or chickens or any of these things. We had, in the early days, we had placards that you put on, the nurse would come out and put on the front of your house if you had scarlet fever. This is, of course, early in the game. Eventually, we had a school program where the kids were checked out. And, all well baby clinics, hearings.
Hearings for what kind of things? Just general?
People would come in and report that Mr. Jones next door had 13 geese in his backyard, and they were bothering him, and they wanted to get rid of it, and he didn't have a license.
So it's your responsibility.
So they, you have to settle the argument in the city as to whether an individual could keep a horse, because it attracts flies, and the people next door don't like flies. So we were always having little things, little benign things. I was on the Board of Health when fluoridation was invented. And we went through a year or two of investigation and decision-making as to whether or not the city movement should be fluoridated. And people got very upset and uptight, and we even got so that religion got involved. The Christian Scientists would say you have no right to poison the water. And when indeed it was voted, one interesting thing happened. They had a so-called mock ceremony in which they opened the pumping plant, in which fluoride was pumped into the water, and the plant is down there. One of them is down near the Quinn Road. And they went through all the process of dedicating this plant and ribbon cutting and everything like that. And as soon as that was all over, the program was not put into effect because it wasn't ready, and it took 2 or 3 months before the fluoride actually was in the water. And during that period of time, we had many complaints of people who suddenly became impotent, or suddenly had stains on their teeth, or suddenly had rash, all from the fluoride that wasn't even present in the water. It's interesting to see.
A hysterical reaction, in a sense.
Well, obviously they were against it, and no matter what happened to them, it was the fault of the fluoride, which fortunately hadn't been put in the water.
So how long would you say it took people to get used to the idea?
I suppose a few months, and then it all quieted down, and nobody really worried much about it. But there was a lot of agitation and efforts to even stop it after once it got going.
From what areas? From the Christian Scientists, you said. What other?
There was a very active anti-fluoridation group which hired dentists to go about the countryside, and not only Newton but all over. Any town that starts to fluoridate, immediately the forces are mobilized against it as an infringement on your right.
Forcing.
In retrospect, of course, nothing has ever happened as far as the fluoride, except that it's put a lot of dentists out of business, because it was very successful in reducing the number of cavities. And the kids that come in here nowadays, where it was a very exceptional child that came in without any cavities 25 or 30 years ago, it's a very exceptional child who comes in here now who has cavities. My brother, the dentist, is glad that his type of general practice would have no reason to exist. He's taking care of all the people who are like myself, who would have 20 or 30 cavities in the course of a couple of years, if you would. Just go back to the dentist and he'd buy 10, fill them all.
I've noticed, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and so we had well water, no fluoride in it. And since I've moved into the city, I've noticed a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is.
Where were you?
Up in Drake. It's right on the New Hampshire border, near Lawrence. Grew up a family of 9 there, on a 100-acre farm. So nothing really, as it turned out, it calmed down after a while and people get used to that. I have one question here. Why did you choose your career? I guess in a sense you've answered that pretty well.
Yeah, my father was very strong, and he endeared himself to the community. He enjoyed an excellent reputation. He was a good father and very strict. And when he said you were going to do something, you usually did it.
Do you think that the church in general had a strong influence in this community? The different churches?
I don't know, except I know that it was attendance at church has fallen way off. People have left it. And because it probably didn't exist as strongly. You know, you were expected to go to church. I went to church as a kid. Went to Sunday school. Not voluntarily, obviously. Catholics have an entirely different attitude as compared to Protestants. They were always very strong. And with a high Catholic population and Upper Falls and the Irish in the center and down here, I would say that the Catholic Church is very strong.
Much more so than...
And the fact that the new bishop is coming today and the radio and television, they're going to devote 2 or 3 days to his reception here. And still
I
is.
was over at the school at the time. I heard the band marching by and they're making a big... When did the Jewish influence start to get strong? It seems like it's grown significantly from what you're saying.
Yeah, I was... when I went to school, if there were no Jewish people in my class. There were the first Jewish families that I think I know about would be down in Onant. One of them is Schwartz Hardware. Another one, I can't think of the name at the moment. He ran a department store down there years, for many, many years. And they were lovely, lovely, beautifully respected people. And there was never any ethnic problems. Well, there were so many different kinds of people around here. On Saturday night was mayhem in Upper Falls with all the ethnic races. And my father, probably in the 20s, carried a pistol in his car when he made house calls. There was a place down there called Haggerty's Corner that was quite exciting, so to speak. Now, I was never involved in that because we lived right here in the Highlands. But sort of peaceful.
Would you say it was ethnic tension or more of ethnic pride voicing itself in the community that people would just get a little bit rowdy on it?
In Upper Falls,
yeah.
That was also brought on by alcohol. There was a lot consumed there. But as far as the influx of the Jewish people was a normal reaction to, as they became more affluent, they came out here because there was a building boom available, there was a lot of space, and they found it an excellent community. They found that the government was to their advantage. The school system especially was attractive to them because it had nationwide honors in the school system. For many years when I was in the school system, I was a student. It was number one in the country except for maybe one place in Shaker Heights, I think.
Always has had a very high reputation.
And this attracts the people searching for an education. Of course, the Jewish people are inclined to take advantage of education.
So when would you say the influx began? After World War II? Particularly, yeah.
It was gradual. They were very successful in maintaining the standards. And got a Jewish mayor and a Jewish head of the school department. And, it's taken its normal course of events. And they are now the majority. And the woolen industry, everybody living out here disappeared. Nobody needed wool anymore. The silk mill closed, but that really had nothing to do with the cotton industry. Went south. Most of the factories migrated elsewhere where labor was cheap, leaving behind vacancies in the community.
What kind of effect did that have on the labor force, do you think? Was it very apparent?
A lot of them went with him, a lot of them moved out. People adjust. There was never any hardship. I don't ever remember.
No real great
In
unemployment?
the Depression, I was in college, of course, in the late 30s. I can remember my father, his reaction to the Depression was that he had to give up his racehorse in 1930 because he couldn't feed it. And so we went to pigeons. We had a stable of pigeons out in the garage, raced pigeons. My father was a competitive individual and a sportsman. And it was much cheaper to feed 50 pigeons than it was one horse. We always had dogs. The dogs were given scraps, fortified with...
Racing dogs or just pets?
No, they were hunting dogs, field setters and pointers.
Did you do a lot of hunting yourself, or?
Never was allowed.
No.
Never was it. Never. I never shot a gun until I had a .45 issued to me in World War II, and I was scared to death. My father was a skeet shooting champion, and he had shotguns. He was an excellent bird hunter, but he never invited his children to go with him.
Why was that? Why do you think?
Couldn't tell you. I never asked him.
No?
He may have felt that, this is something that he wanted to enjoy himself and not share it with his kids.
It's his chance to get away by himself.
As the result, my brothers and I own no firearms. Have nothing to do with hunting or fishing.
Did he do any fishing, your father? What kind of sports were you involved in school, honey?
Sure. I won all of the events in the 8th grade field day and tied one of them with another chap pole vaulting at age, we were about 13 at the time. A 3-legged race, a marathon. This was a field day because we had a full graduation in the high school with diplomas and a big show, and we had a field day a day or two beforehand with the seniors with all of these events, high jump. And this fellow, Dr. Hennessy, and I were the only two who knew how to pole vault. And I learned how in my backyard. We get up to 6'6", and the principal of the school made us stop because he got nervous. I went to high school, and I ended up as captain of the football team. I was a center, and what do they call them? All scholastic. That's the way, when the picture gets published in the newspaper.
Yeah, that's... You think that the sports changed significantly from when you played? No, not really?
No, high school was just the same.
Yeah.
And my two brothers ended up as co-captains 3 years later in the Army. But I was much too small to play in college. I pole vaulted at Mount Hermon. We got 3rd place in the Deerfield meet. I think we got up to 9 or 10 feet. Those are the days of bamboo poles, and I 3 times landed on my head when the pole broke.
Oh, great.
We didn't have the fiberglass that sprung it over.
Yeah.
And I always, played baseball. I
In
never
high
played.
school you played, or just for fun?
No, I was on a high school baseball team. I had one problem, though. When I threw a ball, I never knew where the ball was going to go. But we had excellent athletes as they do now. They don't have as many turn out, I guess, but they do. They still have good football teams. I don't think it's any different.
I think fewer kids probably are interested. Do you think that that's true? Were most of the kids interested in making the team? Did they generally turn a lot away, or?
We had a lot of teams.
So
We had varsity, we had junior varsity, and we had intermediate in between. So we had three, and each one of them had 2 or 3 squads on. And they'd go back. I started playing high school football freshman year when I was 13.
Probably 14 or freshman year.
Hmm?
13 or 14, yeah.
So when I was 13 in April, and I graduated from high school. So I was 13 that fall.
Uh-huh.
I was elected captain of the team when I was 15.
That would be of the junior varsity team? or-
No, the varsity.
Oh.
Because I played varsity football my junior and senior year. And in the fall is when you elect a captain, you see, for the next year.
Yeah.
So when I played varsity full time as first string center, I was 16.
So is that something that the family would come out and watch?
Oh yeah.
So is-
My mother had got gray hairs watching her son get annihilated in a football.
Get rough.
And my sister cut out every clipping that she could find that had to do with my problems. And I have the scrapbook to this day of all the clippings that she cut out and pasted them on and made a scrapbook out of it, so I can still go back and look at that.
Did your team win any championships while you were in there, or?
I don't know what champion, I've forgotten now, but you know, if you beat Brookline, that was the Thanksgiving Day, that you could lose every other game.
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways, I'm just remembering, because I played high school football, and it's a lot the same. The Thanksgiving Day game is the one that counts.
It's no different.
Probably the only thing is the equipment they're using is probably a bit safer. Which isn't anything good.
So at Dartmouth, I didn't do any athletics. I didn't play sandlot ball. I started to ski then. My wife and I have just recently given up skiing. It's time to put them away, before you get killed.
Yeah, I guess it gets to be a dangerous sport. How big, skiing probably wasn't very big at all back then.
No, at Mount Hermon, I bought my first skis, and they were 7 feet long. They had bear something.
Yeah, the bindings that wrap around the back there.
You they never let go, so you either smashed your skis or you broke your leg. I skied a little bit at Dartmouth and learned some of it, but it wasn't until after I was married that I actually could afford to buy appropriate skis. We skied for a while on Longmans. You know, we used to put your arm up in the air at the very quickly took advantage when there was an interest in 5-foot skis. I don't know if you remember.
No, I know that.
But some ski instructor recognized the fact that the weekend skier was stupid to put on a 6.5 or 7-foot ski. So they all went back to 5-foot, and that made a tremendous difference for my wife and I. So from then on, we skied on short skis and enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
But my children all skied, and one of them ended up working in Vail as a skier. I don't think he ever got enjoyed it. They all skied. And now my 4-year-old grandson is skiing in the Laurentians this winter.
Well, that's not bad. Getting ready for the Olympics?
Geez, I don't know. His father said he had a hard time getting them off the slopes, and that's unusual for 4-year-old. You know, if they get cold.
Get cold, you want to get inside, warm up. One thing I'd like to go back to, you mentioned the problem with alcohol in the Upper Falls. What did
Tavern drinking.
Tavern drinking?
Yeah.
So was there a high rate of alcoholism, or just?
High My father told us lots of anecdotes about trying to treat people with alcohol, the delirium treatments and things like that. But I can't give you any statistics.
Mm.
I can only tell you it still is a great problem.
In the Upper Falls particularly?
No.
All over Newton? Was alcohol a big problem in this area? Back in
I don't think so. I think people were
Very
genteel,
temperate.
you know, and they may have had plenty to drink, but it would.
and stayed in the house and didn't.
They were quiet and peaceful about it. And I may be exaggerating what happened in Upper Falls, but it was a tavern type
Well, it's just what you remember, I'm sure.
story.
Yeah.
But as a physician, you know, I would much rather they legalize pot. You don't have any trouble with pot, but you have a terrible time with alcohol.
I think they both present their own problems. Yeah. It's interesting. So
You don't get
so
cirrhosis of the liver from marijuana.
you find that you've had to deal with a lot of problems with alcohol yourself?
As a physician?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the biggest problems, would you say?
Biggest social problem in this our town, as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting how little press it gets as being that, how little people publicize it.
It's wrecked more families.
Always you think been that way in this, since you've been practicing?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. What do you think the general public attitude is? It doesn't seem like it's in line with what you're saying, certainly because drinking is very well accepted. Is this a dry area? Newton Highlands, are there bars or right in the Highlands?
Sure. I met the bartender of Carol's Grill, which is right over
The tracks.
She was telling about her stories. I guess she's been the bartender there for 10 or 15 years. But that's the only bar we went locally. We now have Cantabuzzi that serves wine, serves drinks, but that's not. Most of the drinking is at home. Ends up by taking a 3 martini lunch type.
To dinner.
Maybe I'm exaggerating it from a standpoint, but when it is a problem, it's such a terrible problem that it really is impressed.
Well, I'm sure you, of all people, would have a very strong view of that, because you see a lot of the...
You can't do anything about it. You can't stop them. Once they become addicted, there's no way you can get people to quit.
Do you drink it all yourself?
Yes.
So do you think it's really had an effect on you? Does it make you much more conscious of drinking? The fact that you see this in other people?
No. I mean, I don't need it.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that. We drink on occasion. I'm not on duty tonight, so there's a chance I'll have a cocktail at supper. But the nights that the days and I'm on 5 or 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Well, you could go a week or 2 without having any. And it's mostly wine.
Yeah.
Although on summer vacation.
So would you say that in general around here that the attitude is, or has been, if it's kept at home, in the past the attitude has been if it's kept at home, it's all right. If it's kept undercover, the fact that people are drinking.
The alcoholism that I'm talking about is not the drunk one does.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm talking about people that have 3 or 4 cocktails when they come home, and then they sit and fall asleep, and they're useless citizens, or they sit in front of television.
And those are not necessarily, those can be bank presidents or city workers or anyone.
And the guy who stops and has 2, 3 on coming out from Boston. There's another one when he gets home, and a couple more in the evening. And is mulled, so to speak, and has a little bit more on weekends. Finds himself that he can't stop. There's a 6-pack at night. I'm not talking about the drunk, I'm talking about the guy. And this disturbs the family, and he's shirking his duties, and he's not in any conditions to participate in evening activities, which include civic.
When you say he, is it specifically
Sure.
men or
No, both.
both equally, or would you say there's a higher rate among men from what you've seen?
I'd say it's pretty illegal. I've never kept it.
No, I'm just curious what your impressions are of it. Pretty equal. And you've seen specifically a lot of family problems brought about by alcoholism.
Yeah. I ran a methadone clinic here several years ago, in which I invited the kids that have grown up here who got hooked on heroin to come here, and I would provide them with whatever we could arrange to do it. I did that for several months. I can't remember now whether it was 9 months or a year, but it was a very fascinating thing for me. I did it voluntarily because I had an idea of I'd like to know what this was all about. So we had a few who dropped out, and then we had just a few who succeeded, and then there seems to be a lot of people I never knew whatever happened to. I do still take care of some of the kids who succeeded in overcoming it, who became solid citizens and who haven't had any since.
That wasn't a particularly big problem, was it, at any period? Heroin, it was, in this area specifically, or in general in the Boston area? When was that?
60s.
So it was during the hippie era then. That's right.
The only time I ever got robbed here by one of my methadone clinic boys. He broke into the house looking for dope. All of my daughter's wedding presents were here, and she's been married 14 years.
So about 1960, 1970 actually, the end of the
late
60s.
60s. He smashed down the cellar door at the head of the stairs in order to get into the house. Broke it down. He drank 1 can of beer out of the refrigerator. He stole the tape recorder that was on the corner of the desk. He took a suitcase that belonged to my daughter that was sitting here. And he walked out and locked the door. So I thought that was very nice. He didn't ransack anything, he didn't wreck anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he left all of the thousands of dollars worth of gifts that were in the dining room, sort of pushed underneath the dining room table, which hanging Phillips. Not hidden, they were just out of the way. Very nice. He was one of the failures though. He ended up, I'm sure, somewhere in the dregs of humanity.
So would you say that there is during the 40s and 50s, there was an equivalent to the heroin addiction of the 60s? Was there anything that you would parallel to that? A completely new phenomenon?
We lived a pretty sheltered life out here.
Was there any awareness at the time of alcoholism, do you think? Not that I want to...
It never was preached from the pulpit. There was the Anti-Temperance League. I didn't see them around anywhere. But these are the insidious effects from too much or constant alcohol. And then you have to, if you want to make a study of it, then you have to figure out, was the alcohol simply the way out for a much deeper social problem that was occurring at the time? people were mismatched, people were depressed, was there something else going on? I must admit though, in the practice here, I've been so wrapped up in the individual problems that come in, I lose track of an overall picture.
Of trends within
Here I am, I've been so busy taking care of today, I haven't bothered to look and see what the past was like.
It's interesting. I guess that's not really uncommon. I don't imagine it would be. We do get wrapped up in the day-to-day things.
You get wrapped up in the very small petty things that are very big to an individual, and unless you're keeping statistics, unless you're making an effort, you don't. Yesterday you didn't think that tomorrow you would be asked to talk about today. I didn't say that right, but I think you know. It's like when the fellow came in and audited my income tax one year. I think it was in 1967, and he started asking me all those questions, and I said, I don't have any answers. And he said, you should. I said, well, maybe so, but when I was doing my bookkeeping in 1966 or whatever the years we were doing, I said, I didn't anticipate being audited. Of course, he reminded me that that was the wrong attitude. But indeed, I should, and I can assure you I'd
Changed since then.
If I was audited again, I had the answers. So, that's the situation. I can remember being asked to change the barber shop by my father because the local barber had put in a billiard table, a pool bar in the back of the place where he cut hair, and they were doing what we called in those days nigger pool, bets.
Betting pool.
Now you go over here to almost to the same store and you legally buy a lottery ticket. Now it's legal. But my father was so upset about it that I was asked to find another barber. And the interesting thing is that barber's widow, I think, is on your list, not you personally, but one of
on the
your
school's list.
call on. She's 93 and is very sharp and still lives in the Highlands in the apartments of one of the stores. She's got a great memory. She and I were sitting around the other day talking about a Chinaman who ran a laundry here whose name was Fong Sing. And Fong Sing was a great threat to us kids, and when we walked down the street, there were lots of times we went on the other side around the shop and would holler and then run like mad, holler at him and say, cheeky, cheeky Chinaman, a belly full of rats. And I never knew why I said that. I never thought it was true, but Mrs. Gerasi said, yes, indeed. That the reason that got going in the community was the fact that he made a habit of eating rats, which is a rodent, and we eat squirrels, we can eat
rabbits.
Why can't you eat a rat? See, and the Chinaman was capable of seeing a nutritious meal and not worrying about whether he had a very bad reputation over the past 1,000 years. So he indeed was the recipient of the rats that were caught in the stores. And there were rats, because I can remember sometime in the middle 30s catching 15 of them that were invading our pigeon coop. Wow. One summer we got about 15. They came from the stores.
Was it because of lack of cleanliness, or just...
Well, the rat population there was an A&P store, and perhaps they I know at one time they hired ferrets to come and to clean out the rat population in the summer. And that was another thing in the health department I was exposed to. We made periodic examinations of the restaurants in the community and were involved in shutting them down because of their failure to comply, and the inspectors would find gross negligence in the storage and the preservation. We also were involved in several epidemics of food poisoning in which the local church had a supper and everybody brought chicken salad or something like this, and the large refrigerators that they were using to store in failed the night before. During the night, Staphylococcus had been inoculated by some accident into the chicken salad, and everybody in the church got sick who ate the chicken salad. Improper refrigeration. So to answer the question about what we did in the health department, to do some of the other things, periodic inspection. There was in those days you sent an inspector out into the milk shed, and an individual who would be observed for the use of cheesecloth over his milking pails. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure.
The tuberculin testing of herds was part of the job of the Newton Health Department. Of any of the milk that was sold in the community. Interestingly enough, a man from Maine has come down with shrimp for sale. He has a little truck over here at a filling station at the Four Corners. Walnut and Deep.
Yeah, sure.
And I inquired as to what it would cost for him to start business, because he was getting $3 a pound for shrimp, and I knew he was buying the shrimp in Maine. He'd buy 100 pounds for $100, so he was getting $2 a pound. I also noticed that he had ice, and I noticed he had nice buckets and all that sort of stuff. When he arrived in town, the Newton Health Department required that he go through X number of procedures before he was allowed a vitrinous license. And at the cost of, he got the license for $50. But he had to have ice. And one day he was down there with his shrimp packed full of ice and the temperature 10 degrees outside. And if he'd gone in there without the ice, the inspector had gone by, he would have been faulted, because he didn't have ice in his truck. So, one industry we had here for a long time was an ice house. They harvested ice in Crystal Lake, and I'm old enough to remember that. I can remember the night the ice house burned down.
That was a great hardship to the area, I'm sure. No, not by them? Or?
No.
But then refrigeration was being used, or?
Well, when the ice house burned down, it was not being used as an ice house. It was probably vacant.
Oh.
I do remember the saws and conveying the ice up. And when we had the first refrigerator we had here was, within my memory, and I can remember the Iceman coming, and I can still smell it. Backing in with 100 pounds of ice in a little container in the back hall. 4 doors. The top left-hand door had the ice. Backed in with 100 pounds of ice. Back. Held by the tongs.
Yeah.
Big leather cape. The fellow who picked up the garbage, drove in the yard with a horse and a buggy or thing. And that was the beginning of the joke, which had what is 4 wheels and flies. That was the garbage truck. It sure did have the flies.
Yeah.
And it was taken to the piggeries, the local piggeries on the outskirts of town. You had piggeries.
Well, I mean, in the area, yeah, there was one up on, 5 or 10 years ago on 93.
And that, unfortunately, you see, once they started cooking all the garbage, it made it too expensive to keep the pigs.
Locally, there's a farmer down the street from us who still keeps for himself a few pigs. So what kind of garbage would they be given? Everything? This guy would take away everything and
Yeah.
they would sort through, or just throw everything
no,
out there for
they
the
just-
pigs?
Just throw it all out there.
Doesn't seem like that would be too sanitary. Were there any problems with that? Or?
Sure, that's where trichinosis comes from, because the garbage attracts the rats, and the pigs eat the rats, and you transmit the trichinosis from the rats to the pigs to the human. And the scraps of raw food that has the encysted trichinosis in it is sent back to the piggery. The pigs eat that, and then the cyst is eaten, and then it goes through its life cycle within the pig, and the pig's infected. At one time, 30 years ago, about 20% of all the autopsies done in the Boston area had the trichinosis, which is a parasite that's transmitted from pork. And Newton Wellesley Hospital had a case this fall, the first one for a long time, of acute trichinosis.
Comparative.
My last case in this office was a man by the name of Mr. McKay. He ate a hot dog at the Amherst game. This must be 25 years ago. And became acutely ill. Made the diagnosis.
Certainly not the problem that it was.
Oh no. I wouldn't know that if I saw it probably. I wouldn't be thinking about it.
Yeah. Wouldn't be looking for it. It's very interesting. I guess that really brings to light specifically some of the changes that occur just by, in medicine, just by the fact that trichinosis is no longer a problem, or different health problems are no longer as acute as they were.
There's a Pheasant School over in West Newton, which is a private school for first grade up to 8th grade. And I've been the physician there for about 35, 36 years. When I went there, the infirmary was a building which had 3 floors. The top floor had private rooms with a toilet in it. No sink, just a toilet. There were many in a row. The second floor was a ward in which we could sleep about 30 sick kids. And it was a nursing station. The first floor was a doctor's office, a dining room, boarding spaces for the help. In 35 years, the infirmary has shrunk so that it now occupies part of the second floor only. The private rooms for isolation on the third floor have all been done away with. They're now apartments for married people because we have no contagious diseases anymore except chickenpox. We have no measles, no mumps, no scarlet. I won't say scarlet fever, we have plenty of strep, but we have no actual scarlet fever. And polio is gone. We don't have trouble with the flu like we used to have. Viral infections, mumps, that's all gone. Those are the ones that went up to the third floor. There's no need for help anymore, so the first floor is now a kindergarten and a classroom, offices. The second floor is shrunk down so that we have about 7 or 8 beds, and they're hardly ever full. I used to go there every day, sometimes on weekends. Now I go 3 days a week. Preventative medicine has made a beautiful change. So we don't strep or scarlet fever, you isolate for 2 days. Usually you don't even bother to that. You just get penicillin and continue in school. So that was wonderful.
When you were a kid, were you inoculated for mumps, and did you get any or all of those things?
Sure. In 1923, the 4 oldest had scarlet fever. And my father, who was a physician, had to leave the house, and he moved away because he couldn't live in the house. There was a placard on the door Milkman left the bottles and couldn't pick them up to take them away. We lost 6 weeks of school. My brother lost, my sister lost the enamel on her teeth. My brother had complications, I remember. Nobody got heart disease out of it, as far as I know. But we were a bunch of sick people. And in order for the 4 of us who were going to school, my twin brothers were too young to go to school, my father hired a teacher who came the whole month of July, and in the room upstairs over this one, we had summer school for the month of July, while all the rest of the kids were out.
You must have enjoyed that.
So,
Ooh, that would be
but as a
hard.
result, we were not required to stay back a year. I remember whooping cough. I had whooping cough because the vaccine was not well, it was available, but it was too dangerous. Nobody wanted to do it. The mumps, the measles, chickenpox, German measles. That all. My kids had measles, German measles, mumps, because those vaccines had come along.
I think, as far as I remember, the only thing I've had is chicken pox. Just like you said, the only.
My kids, well, the kids coming now aren't going to have that. There's no need for it.
Would you say there's a much higher incidence of death due to any of those among children in particular?
Now?
No, it was back when you were a kid.
Well, yeah, some kids died from these things, but not many.
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't.
Once in a while you get a complication. I can remember losing one kid in the family who got a heart complication from measles. He had congenital heart disease and that. And we weren't very sharp in those days. We didn't know things. I can remember my father losing 2 teenage boys on the same day who developed a boil in their upper lip or on the corner of their nose. They both died on the same day.
What was that due to?
Staph infection that tracked up and goes up into the brain and causes an abscess brain. Unheard of. Not unheard of, not heard of. If I lost 2 15-year-old patients in a day, I think I'd be so depressed I wouldn't be able to practice medicine. We're not used to that.
That is unheard of, certainly. Especially in a small community or and particularly with the same doctor. How many doctors were around? How many?
There's a picture of them in 1914, yeah. That's the Newton Medical Club.
So that includes all of Newton? Anyone who practiced in the city of Newton?
There from, maybe 1 or 2 there from Wellesley. That's 1914. The reason that's there is my father's name.
So there are 26 there?
And of course, that's probably only half of it. To a lot of doctors. This has always been a nice place to practice.
Sure.
You're near the cultural.
It's a pleasant area, yeah, I can see that.
Last night we drove into the museum and listened to one of the top architects in the country named Helmut Kahn, who's out of Chicago, and he lectured on the skyscraper.
And the development of the skyscraper, is it?
He's a design architect. The only reason why we went is that my youngest boy is, after being out of college for a while, has gone back to Yale School of Architecture. Encouraged us to go listen to this guy. There's three lectures. The Museum of Fine Arts has this sort of thing going on all the time.
I'm just
So it's a nice place to be. You run into Boston, and in those days, all you have to do is go to the the west side of 128, you were in the wilderness, woods.
Yeah, that creates, I guess, a different.
My father used to go hunting on the other side of 128
Wow.
for pheasant. Wellesley.
So Wellesley, isn't what it is today.
Yeah. It's grown like everything else, although they had a different, their houses are farther apart at first.
You know, something I noticed here, very, very close. The houses are very close in this area. Always have been like that, same.
Oh, yeah.
Are most of these houses 75, 100 years old at least?
Well, I don't know what most of them, but you can tell by, all you have to do is to look at the filigree over the door and you know that that's the turn of the century. The little circle.
Yeah.
And you, if you can walk into a house and pretty well
Yeah.
get an idea about how much design, how low the ceiling is, things like that. And a lot of these were done without too many plans.
Just add on as you go along.
They develop things. We were considering doing some things the other day, and I discovered that the filigree, which is over the windows in the front of the house, it's a little circular thing, is on the south side of the house also over the windows. But I never noticed it before that it isn't,
On the north.
it isn't on the north or the west side. See, because the center of activity is there.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says, well, nobody's going to look at it this side. Why don't you just do it towards the town, towards the railroad station, towards the front. Trolley cars, when I was a kid, up and down the street.
Walnut right here? Or?
He went from Watertown to Needham. That was an interesting noise. Why these ceilings aren't cracked, I don't know. Except that they're covered with canvas. These are canvas-covered ceilings, which holds the plastic together.
So as old as the house is?
It's never been touched, other than paint.
Yeah. All of this stuff original, all this woodwork here?
There's a fireplace behind you.
Which was taken out.
In order to put another furnace downstairs, when I added that in '54. Office wing that you came in.
Uh-huh.
The architect of this little wing grew up to be the architect of the Newton North High School. If you know anything about
Yeah,
that.
I do. Yeah. So that was when he was first starting out.
Now he's working for Smithsonian and building another building there.
Really? Another museum?
I started in the right direction.
Great. This is
His wife was matron or maid of honor or something at her wedding. So.